Hey guys, I am sorry that this took as long as it did. First things first, we have a cat that we're taking care of. She's a foster. We're not planning on keeping her, but I'm also allergic to her, so that plays into number 2 as to why this took so long to do. And it's Devil May Cry, so obviously I was working on the Let's Play anyway, but yeah, this is the reason why I had to take a break from YouTube. I'm allergic to cats. And my sinuses did not get any better moving forward with the month. It got worse and worse and worse. Working at it now. Have some medicated nasal spray. Working it out. So, Devil May Cry is an interesting game series. It actually started out as Resident Evil 3, shockingly enough. Yeah, after Hideki Kamiya? I'm probably going to butcher people's names here. Made Resident Evil 2, which was gold. They wanted him to work on Resident Evil 3 right the hell away. So he got right to work, but Kamiya wanted a game on different hardware than the original PlayStation 1. So he opted to wait for the next generation to accomplish what he wanted. This caused an issue for Capcom, who wanted more numbered Resident Evil games on the PlayStation 1. So a spin-off was eventually titled Resident Evil 3, and Kamiya was now suddenly working on Resident Evil 4. However, eventually it was found out that this version of the game was actually an action game, in which Tony Redgrave, genetically altered by Umbrella, was the super powerful version of Leon Kennedy. With the game being more action, less horror, but with horror elements, Capcom and Kamiya agreed that this probably wasn't a Resident Evil game. The game was still fun, though. Finally, we got to the PlayStation 2 Classic. Changing from zombies and science to using demons and Dante's Inferno as references, Devil May Cry was born. Using a handsome, slick protagonist that sort of looked like Leon, the game came out as a 3D action game hardly seen before, until God of War came out a few years later. My history was when a friend of mine ended up with the PlayStation 2. He happened to get stuck on this particular game, and he called me for assistance. Why? I'm not exactly sure. I was considered a video game master by my friend group back in the old days, but I did happen to find the route he needed in the first game. By jumping off an edge. Instead of dying like you normally would, I actually found the route that you needed to take. Though, to be fair, there weren't a lot of places in the game you could actually jump off the edge. So maybe I was onto something? Who knows? Many years later, after buying my fiancée the game series in HD, I kind of became more of a DMC fan. She's a huge Devil May Cry fan. She did mention being stuck in the first game someplace. I played for some time and asked her eventually where I was in the game, and all I really got was I passed by where she was stuck. After having her describe the area, well, come to find out, she was stuck in the exact same place my friend was all those years ago. I blew past that area very quickly because I had already figured out where to go years before. Oops. Oh well. After all, I eventually reviewed the game on my YouTube channel, which was, kind of early. It was still an early YouTube channel, and that review is still up if you care to watch it. However, I've been slightly re-reviewing, I guess, some of my earlier reviews as I changed the way I work out scores and reviews. So without further stalling in history, I say we take on one of the nastiest demons ever. Let's do this. Let's take on Mundus. Time for a rematch. Also, this is a round 1, as Mundus will be back. Sort of. So the story begins, and it starts telling you about this guy named Sparta, a legendary demon that was not only incredibly powerful, but a pretty decent guy for being a demon. He ends up turning on his own kind to save humans, but at some point he vanished after leaving a human woman with some half-demon children. We actually start the story with Dante in his shop called Devil May Cry, a shop in which you can hire Dante as a demon hunter. Basically like a mercenary, but for killing demons. A woman who is clearly not fully human herself, named Trish, bursts through the door and suddenly attacks Dante, impaling him. Dang, roll credits. But no, Dante isn't actually dead. Either he has a yellow orb on hand, or he's just more durable in the cutscenes than in the actual game. Either way, he shoots at Trish. Trish tells him that she was only testing his power, and that Mundus, the old enemy of Dante's father, was dangerously close to being released. Dante and Trish agree to work together to stop him, and they leave as a photo that kind of looks like Trish is seen on the ground. Huh, mysterious. After getting on the island and castle, Trish immediately yeets out of the story and leaves Dante to do all the work. Gee, thanks. Dante fights and kills Phantom, a giant spider running the castle, and reveals that he is indeed the son of Sparta. Dante also fights Griffin in a nearby arena. Griffin is defeated, but not quite killed, so Dante feels like the demon doesn't really need to die, but since Griffin failed, Mundus kills him anyway. Dante's pretty pissed and ends up talking to Trish, who just kind of reappears here. Dante mentions that his mother and brother Virgil were killed by Mundus. This is heavily hinted at the main reason that Sparta came in and sealed Mundus away, for revenge. Probably why Dante is here as well, but then something happens. Nello Angelo, a foe that looks suspiciously like Dante's Devil Trigger form, is actually revealed to be alive, Virgil, working for Mundus. Yeah, Dante basically defeats Virgil and takes his necklace, which combines into Dante's necklace. This is the key to go to the underworld. Eventually, in the underworld, Dante fights this monstrous nightmare-like machine one last time, and then Trish betrays Dante. It isn't exactly shocking since we, the player, saw her with Mundus after Virgil was defeated. But Dante seems pretty surprised despite her clearly not being human. However, Dante reveals that the main reason he took her at face value, and even saves her after the betrayal, was because she looks identical to his mother. Yep, Mundus made Trish look just like Dante's mom. Dante is really upset that Trish is just another demon, but later on when Dante confronts Mundus, he's seen torturing Trish. This obviously upsets Dante. I can't blame him. But Trish ends up even saving Dante's life, nearly sacrificing her own. And Dante has his fight with Mundus. After the fight, Dante leaves her his mother's necklace and his father's sword, Sparta. Then Dante tries to escape while Mallet Island, the island with the castle on it, is basically sinking. While doing so, Mundus reveals he's still alive, and then so does Trish. They either kill or at least seal away Mundus, defeating him permanently, for now anyway, and escape via biplane. So, at the end of the day, Devil May Cry is a lonely guy dealing with the death of most of his family and possibly finding out he doesn't have to be lonely. Take that kind of emotional drama and add into the plot about this family's murderer and revenge and make all the bad guys demons, and bam, you have Devil May Cry. Overall, though, I think the story works. There is some dialogue that is absolutely silly for sure, but at the end of the day, I love the story. Dante, at the end of the day, has a personal reason to be there. And while Mundus needs to be stopped regardless, being a possible end-of-the-world threat after all, it is nice Dante has some stakes here as well. Hashing out the loss of his mother, brotherly rivalry, and the job that his dad left him, you want to see Dante continue and succeed as a character. So let's talk about the game's soundtrack and quality for a minute. Interesting to note that the music isn't the first thing I think of when I think of this game. Like Resident Evil, the game has more of an atmospheric soundtrack, but with more cathedral-sounding music. Now, this isn't bad by itself, but if you were listening to these alone, you wouldn't immediately think of an action game. Plus, some of the soundtrack is just plain weird. Not all of it fits the tone of the game. In fact, some of it doesn't fit really anything realistically. There are always times when I'm wondering what the hell I'm even hearing. You mostly hear battle tracks, though. These are some decent battle tracks in the game for sure. If you were to listen to anything, I'd recommend them. The battle tracks are high energy and a stark contrast from the normal level music. Basically, the level music is more sounding like unease, I guess you could say. It's kind of paying tribute to the horror elements that the game used to come from. My favorite track, though, is possibly Psycho Siren. Despite the mini-boss of the Shadow Panther being an absolute pain in the ass to deal with, when you first hear the track, it is good. Ultraviolet, Lock and Load, Super Ultraviolet, and Legendary Battle are some of my favorites, but even Legendary Battle version 2 and Phantom's boss music are pretty damn good. I hate to say it though, Nello Angelo has some of the better music in the game. His design is great too, looking very similar but not identical to Dante's own Devil Trigger form. This is the first hint that Nello Angelo is related to Dante. that you get in the game. And his final fight showing off Virgil's face works so well. Sorry, I had to bring that up. Let's get back to the sound and talk about the voice acting in this game. It is not terrible, but they lay into it a bit hard sometimes. The lines Dante says are just so comical without intending to be, but they're mostly saved for the end of the game. Yeah, I have no issues through the rest of the game, oddly enough. The voice work could use a bit of polish, but it's not horrible either. At least I've heard worse. Yeah, it's the middle of the road. Until Dante shouts out some weird line like, "Fill your soul with light!" That sounds like he suddenly hit puberty, and it's just more notable at the end of the day. Does it sound awful? Absolutely, but I kind of love it too. Trish and Mundus just sound better overall. The demons do talk, at least the big boss fights talk, but they don't do enough to warrant talking about. Speaking of those demons, I do love Phantom's design. He's a giant lava spider with a scorpion tail hiding in his rear. That's actually really awesome. I love the lesser versions of him as well. They're basic enemies after a while. But Griffin's design is something else. I don't like Griffin in this game. His design is just all over the place. It's like they took the top of his head and spliced it into some weird mouth-looking thing where they just replicated it like 4 times. Blah. Nightmare is just a demonic machine that looks kind of cool. Mundus, however, I love his design. He starts off like a statue and then turns into a more angelic but older statue, which is somewhat symbolic. Remember, demons in origin were just traitorous angels, and this really shows with Mundus here. Obviously a very old demon with an angelic body. He also seems like he'd be perfect for like a false god motif design here as well. When you finally reach him, it's in a room that kind of looks like a church with a choir singing in the background. Trish is also designed very well. She looks like Dante's mom, but clearly doesn't dress like her, and it's obviously created by Mundus to really mess with Dante. I even love the smaller demons of the game, the puppet-like monsters, the various forms of reptiles, the Reaper-looking guys with scissors, all of which are designed awesomely. Lastly, Dante himself and his weapons. I love the look of Alistair's, since I was always using the dang thing, but Dante himself is a bit of a mixed bag. I don't hate his design here, but I just feel later games would nail this look even better. But overall, this isn't bad either. He still has a simple look overall, which is what I like in Dante. Yeah, I think this game looks perfectly fine for a PlayStation 2 game, but I don't really have a lot of experience on the PlayStation 2 either. The only other title I really know about is God of War and maybe Final Fantasy X, which, yeah, you're not going to outcompete Final Fantasy X, let's be real here. I'd say God of War looks a little bit better, but it comes later on, so I can't really compare that either. But I don't think this game looks bad, and I think it still holds up a bit today. So when talking about the gameplay, Devil May Cry is an action game hack and slash variety. Basically, you have demonic bad guys and weapons to deal with them. Dante has Force Edge, the default sword that is really just garbage until you get Alistair, which in my opinion is just simply the best weapon in the game. It's an electric blade that allows Dante to access Devil Trigger, a somewhat broken ability that heals Dante over time while boosting his speed and strength. Hell, Dante can even fly in Devil Trigger, though I was never really good at figuring out how to do this. Oh well. Dante also gets Ifrit, a set of gauntlets and boots that allow Dante hand-to-hand combat with powerful fire moves. I don't really like this. It's a bit too close range for me personally, and I often don't use the versions of this weapon that keep popping up in the future games. Just an FYI. Still a nice option for those who want to focus more on power. Ifrit is stronger but slower. It also has a Devil Trigger option, which is pretty cool. Lastly, Force Edge eventually unlocks into Sparta. This sword is devastatingly powerful, but lacks Devil Trigger, so I don't use it as much as Alistair. Combos bought for Alistair transfer to Sparta, which is awesome though. Next, Dante can get guns. He starts out with Ebony and Ivory, 2 twin pistols which are fast and long range. Even later in the game, they're still pretty useful. Next is a shotgun, which is a powerful but close range. There's also the grenade launcher, which is stronger and further range, but also can't be used in the air. I often use the shotgun for middle ground of power and mobility, unless I need to fight at a distance, in which I switch to the pistols. You also have the needle gun for underwater combat, a gun you use about twice. Swimming isn't great in the game anyway, so I'm glad this doesn't show up very often. Lastly, there's a secret gun, a prototype of the boss fight Nightmare. This is the most powerful gun in the game, but takes Devil Trigger gauge energy to use. The rest of the guns have infinite ammo, but this gun takes away Devil Trigger, which could create issues. Still, the bullets ricochet, which is totally awesome. The more charge, the more powerful the shot. Nice. Combat can switch between guns and swords pretty seamlessly, and combos are the name of the game, really. Avoiding attacks and using the mix of guns and swords is your best way to rack up really nice combos. You get ranked on each combo you do. You'll be jumping, slashing, shooting, and devil triggering your way through the demonic army of Mundus after all. You can buy items to help you as well. You receive red orbs for killing demons and finding secrets, and you can spend these on new moves and combos, as well as items. They're standard healing or momentary enhancements. I rarely use items unless I need some health or boost on my devil trigger meter. However, you can find some of these items in the levels proper too. These levels are mostly open in the castle, and you can explore these areas to your heart's content. You'll find specific items to help you progress while dealing with Phantom, the giant spider. You fight him early on, and he's a tough fight at first. Yeah, I don't like the camera in this first fight. It makes things awkward to deal with when you can't see the boss, and his attacks become really difficult to dodge properly when you can't see them coming. You'll need some good timing to dodge his attacks, even if you can see them coming. But when the camera is facing a wall you happen to be close to, good luck. Hell, the Panther mini-boss isn't much better. I still can't figure out how to kill this damn thing properly without using Devil Trigger. Luckily, it only shows up twice on normal difficulty. However, after that, things are a bit smoother. Nello and Jello is a fair boss fight, and the second fight with Phantom is more open with less camera issues. That's nice! The first fight with Griffin is also in a big open area. It's the second fight that kind of sucks because you're basically on the ghost ship. But the third fight is fine once you know what you're doing. You encounter Nello and Jello's second fight around here too, but you're mostly dealing with Griffin after leaving the castle to the Colosseum. The Colosseum is a huge area, and most of the work you have to do is just getting into the Colosseum, all for one item, and then you're way back into the castle. Hell of a fetch quest, I'm not going to lie. Going into the castle, though, that's where things get a little bit interesting. It's the same basic layout, but more evil energy is leaked into the castle, warping it. Yeah, it's basically the same place, but more twisted. And after some Mario 64 painting hopping, you get the last fight with Nello and Jello, aka Virgil, and then you go straight to the underworld. At this point, you've fought the Nightmare tank thing twice, and in the underworld, you have to fight it once more with Trish betraying you. You never really fight Trish directly, though. She just kind of aids Nightmare in the last fight. None of these fights are too bad, but Nightmare is a weird function that forces you to refight a previous boss in the middle of fighting Nightmare. This can be annoying, but it can also heal you, so I guess it's not all bad. The fight with Mundus, though, what the hell happened here? This is a two-phase fight. Not shocking, but phase 1 is a 3D bullet hell. What? Why? Nothing in the game even prepares you for this. Nowhere in the game do you have to play bullet hells. Anywhere. Period. Until you get here. It isn't bad. It is kind of fun, but I don't play a lot of bullet hells. And this is a tough one for someone of my skill set, as Mundus kind of hits like a truck here. He basically plays like a final boss in a bullet hell. Again, it isn't super hard to figure out how to dodge most of his attacks, but this is such a shift in gameplay that never showed up before anywhere in the game. After that, you get more of a traditional boss fight. But if you're low on yellow orbs, which act like lives by the way, or healing items, this can be really tough too. If you run out of yellow orbs, the game spits you back to where you saved last. Probably should save between every mission just in case. Totally didn't happen to me. Yeah. Still, restarting this fight because the game is punishing you for not playing a brand new game style very well kind of sucks. Outside of that though, and the plane section at the end of the game, which kind of plays somewhat similar, The rest of the game plays mostly fine. Despite how many of my friends get stuck in the same area, I don't think anything in the game is super confusing or taxing. The puzzles here are super simple. Like, these puzzles sometimes make Resident Evil look complicated, but unlike Resident Evil, the puzzles are often environmental based. You will have to figure out how to platform here and there to progress. This works, but this is overall kind of clunky. Dante can long jump and high jump when he feels like it. You often have to be at the perfect place to get this to actually happen, but the more you practice, the better you will eventually understand kind of how it works. Unfortunately, the level design takes a dip in quality. Not so much that it hurts a lot, but in between the fixed camera during boss fights really messing with you, yeah, this can be a slog at times. When the level design does work, however, it's fun for sure, but the levels seem to stem from Devil May Cry not really knowing what it's going to be, horror or action. Some of the minor enemies can be a pain in the ass too. Sometimes you almost have to use Devil Trigger to even win, but nothing in the game actually tells you that, you just kind of have to figure it out, which is probably not the greatest design ever. Now, when it comes to finding treasure and side questing, there isn't really a huge amount to do here, but what is here is pretty decent overall. You'll most likely find items and weapons to help you survive. I don't have footage of it, but there is a secret gun you can get in the mission where you kill Griffin on. Before the fight, you have to go into a room using the shield emblem, but there's actually a room on the other side of the Colosseum which you can also open with the same emblem. It's basically the same room. One has a pair of lances which is needed to progress, but the other side just has this secret gun that uses Devil Trigger energy as ammo. I don't use it very often because I really like having Devil Trigger over that much power, but it is an option. The other secrets you can find are mostly orbs. While orbs are plentiful, it isn't a bad idea to take time to grind these out. Buying combos and moves from Alistair really helps in the end. I'm sure Ifrit combos can help too, but Alistair also has the combos transferred over to Sparta when you get that, making that sword better overall. Sparta, again, lacks Devil Trigger, so I hardly use it. Anyway, you can also buy purple and blue orbs with your red orbs as currency. Purple orbs increase your Devil Trigger, which is always useful, and blue orbs are permanent health boosters, giving you more health to work with. You not only have to buy these, but you can find fragments of blue orbs around the levels. They're hidden pretty well, but collect 4 of them and you get another boost. They are worth it for sure. There's also secret missions that you can find that give you more red orbs, as well as secret areas to give even more red orbs. Hey look, money is money, and while the one healing item, the Vital Star, isn't super expensive, you can only carry one, so buying sword and health upgrades is also important. You can also unlock costumes that boost power if you beat harder difficulties. I'm not that good at the game though, so I rarely did this. Hard mode is different enemy layouts and it's fairly different overall though, so by all means give it a try if you're good enough to actually beat the main game, that is. The only real issues I have with the first Devil May Cry game is simply the level design and the sound direction. Yep, that's it. Don't get me wrong, the gameplay is a bit clunky. There isn't a super huge reason to explore, and the story is told slightly disjointed. I just don't think that overall, these issues are so bad that they affect enjoyment of the game as a whole. The sound design, though, kind of does. The music outside of the battle tracks is, at best, something that doesn't really fit with the game, and at worst, something that doesn't fit with anything in general. The voice acting, while I love it, could be better overall and felt somewhat low effort, for a game that came out 22 years ago anyway. Metal Gear Solid was already a thing by this point, and it was a console generation beforehand. Yes, I love the cheese, but sadly not everyone will. Besides, I love it because it's funny, not because it brought out the seriousness of, what was supposed to be that scene. As for the level design, there's a lot of platforming in a game that doesn't have great platforming mechanics. The camera will hurt too, especially on boss fights. Some of these boss fights are not super fun because of this. Hell, Griffin is always a pain with how he flies away from you and then zeroes in on you while you're trying to dodge. You need to see his attacks to dodge them properly, and even in his first fight, this can be a bit difficult with the camera. And I actually like that fight. However, most of the fights and levels are fun, camera aside. The battle music and looks of the game are great, and the gameplay is fantastic, when I'm not required to figure out how to fly. The story keeps me invested in Dante and his adventures, and finding blue orbs is indeed rewarding, and maybe I'll play hard mode one day to unlock some of those costumes. Overall, Devil May Cry is a great game, especially for an early PlayStation 2 game. A solid 8 out of 10, and worth a look if you're curious at all. Or, you like God of War and you want to see the OG version of God of War. Yeah, Devil May Cry is OG compared to it, so any similarities can be seen as God of War, borrowing from its older brother. But that's all the time I have for this review, and I'm sorry that this year ended on such a small note. But I have become a little bit busier. This season was rough towards the end. But once we find a permanent home for the cat, and I'm done moving, and all of this is taken care of, I'm hoping to get back on track, stronger than ever. Either way, I'm hoping this year I play more PlayStation classics. And until next time, subscribe, like, comment. That stuff really does help out my channel, guys. And we'll see you in the next video, my minions. Take care. Bye-bye.